The Magical Journey of STEM.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our sixth episode of the Magical Journey of STEM. So we have some information we're going to go over today about the selection process for NCSSM and our congressional district. So for those who do not know, whenever we are selecting students for the class or whatever class we're selecting for at science and math, we do have to adhere to congressional districts. And so that is part of our mandate whenever we're picking students who are going to be enrolled at our school. And so Tracy's going to talk a little bit more about that. But I'm just going to kind of start us out with talking about selection. So if you are currently in the application process, the application deadline has already passed. And so we know you got those applications in with CFNC by January the 5th. And so now it's kind of like the next steps. And, we told you about Blackbaud, we've told you about transcripts and evaluations and things like that. But you kind of might want to know, like, okay, so what happens after all that? You've got all this information, so what do you do with it? So for us, we always say, you could try to butter us up, bribe us, give us a meal or something like that, but we're not actually the one to read your applications. So the selection process is a 3-day process on either our Durham campus or our Morganton campus. We go back and forth every year. And we have educators, counselors, community members from all across the state of North Carolina. And then we have some of our great staff and faculty from science and math who, are all in one location for those 3 days. And they read your applications. They're not reading every single application. So they're not reading, every single application that we get in. So we are breaking it down by congressional district. So each team that we have for selection reads per congressional district. Or if there's some congressional districts that might have, a larger number of applicants, we might break that down into smaller teams as well. Just so, we kind of get a lot of different eyes on it. At least 3 people are going to read your applications and things like that. You want to actually make sure we can get it done in 3 days because, some CDs might take more than 3 days if, just 3 people are reading that whole entire congressional district. And so, like I said, with that, we have 3 different people who are reading every single application, and they go over every piece of information that you give us within your application. So, they're looking at your actual application. So, we get all that from CFNC. So we look at that. Your transcript, we look at that. Your evaluations from your STEM teacher, your English teacher, your counselor. We look at all those different things. And so they score your application based on that. So, people ask, what should I focus more on and things like that? Because they think more like one thing might be weighted more than another. But like I said, yes, we do have a rubric and things like that, but all the different parts of the application are very important. Because we can get lots of different things from different, parts of the application. So, with your essays, we can see your writing skills. We can see your interest in STEM. You can see your passion, your work ethic, and all those different things we can all see from, different parts of the application, like your essays. With your evaluations, we're learning things about how you are as a student, the rigor of classes that you're taking, how you are as a student. And so it's all these different things we are able to get from the different pieces of that application. So it's not like, let me make sure I have all A's and then I don't really focus that much on my essays. That's not a great way of thinking about it. We're looking at you holistically. So that's why we ask for all the different things. We ask for the essays, we ask for the transcripts, we ask for the extracurriculars too. Because we look at how involved you are, community involvement and your extracurriculars. And so all these different things are taken into consideration whenever students are being scored for their application. And like I said, at least 3 people are doing it. So it's not just one person that's kind of deciding your fate and things like that. We want to make sure that, we're getting as many eyes on it as possible and making sure that everybody is being scored fairly. So each of the different teams all have the same rubric. They're all looking at the same guidelines and things like that. And so a lot of people who have done selection have been doing it for years, or, are at science and math and things like that. So they're very well prepared. So we do trainings with them and things like that. because, the state of North Carolina is so, vastly different and things like that, we make sure that people are, aware of different areas of the state. So, even if we have somebody who might be from the western part of the state, they might not know how the eastern part of the state is. And so we got to make sure that they are well-rounded and well-informed as far as what those schools have, what the landscape of different counties and the congressional districts are, and things like that. So we just want to make sure it's as fair as a process as possible for all the students who are a part of our application process. Like I said, we all read them, not we, the selection committee members all read per congressional district. So that is kind of an overview of what that process looks like. And like I said, it is a 3-day process. And after those 3 days, then it's time for the selection of the class and things like that. So that is how it all works. Like I said, we look at the scores that students get. I will say we do look at your math assessment here in our office, but the selection team does not see your math assessment score. So that is a score that only the admissions office is able to see. And we do get the question often is like, oh, can I see what my math assessment score is? We do not release that to anyone either. So even if you get in or you don't, for your wait list, though, we do not get that information out. Just so, to prevent some questions in the future. So that is basically a good overview of what our selection process looks like. And to talk more about congressional districts, I'm going to let Tracy take that over.
All right, so I'm going to cover the exciting world of congressional districts. And you may not be really familiar with congressional districts because you're not of voting age yet, but your parents probably are. When your parents go to the polls and vote every year or every 4 years, how often they vote based on where their house or their home is located. And so it's probably a neighborhood, and it can expand to be a county, or it can be multiple counties, or it can be part of a county. It's a whole range, and it depends on how populated the area is in which you live. And so right now in North Carolina, we have 14 congressional districts, but the key to that is it changes a lot. So they have actually recently voted in a new congressional map, and I'm not sure exactly what year that's going to go into effect. But right now for the class of 2026, we're using the older one. The new one will go effect, and whenever we find that one out for sure, we'll be able to tell those applicants later in the future that when that goes into effect. But you always want to make sure that you know what map that we're using. So currently we're using not the brand new one, but we're using the one right before. So it's basically what your parents are using when they go and vote. So why is that important? It's important because we have, when we open applications, we have roughly 490 seats available for our students. So that's about how many students that we're going to be looking at. And we're mandated by the state of North Carolina to make sure that that is fairly distributed among the state of North Carolina. So we need to have people from all across. So if we take that 490, and I'll put those numbers on there, 490, and we divide that by the 14 congressional districts, we get 35. So 35 is about how many each district will get when it comes to students. So we do have a little bit of play. It can be maybe 36 here and 34 there. It can play around just a little bit, but it needs to be really close to 35 people. So each congressional district, depending on no matter how many people are in that district is allotted 35 spots. That's how we figure out who is going to be accepted into NCSSM. So once we go through the selection process that Kenesha talked about, we will then take that and make sure that we have that evenly distributed. And if we don't, then we have to make necessary adjustments to make sure that we do have that equal. Because again, we are funded by the state of North Carolina. And one of their mandates for our funding is that we are equal all across the state. So that means we want students from every nook and cranny all over the area to make sure our students are covered. It would be really easy to pick 490 students out of Charlotte or out of Durham, but that wouldn't be fair to all of those students that are in much smaller counties. I come from a much smaller county, so I know what it's like to maybe be compared to some larger counties, and it's not always fun. So we wanted to make sure that those smaller counties are equally represented along those big ones as well, too. So that's what those congressional districts are for. I will show the map that we're currently using and kind of look at that just a little bit so you can see. But again, remember, it changes quite frequently. So you can't always just assume that we're using the most current, because right now we're not using the most current. It hasn't gone into effect yet. So just, if you don't know, just reach out to us, and you can always send an email to admissions@NCSSM, and we can let you know what map that we're using.
Yeah. For students who are currently in the process, if you just Google the North Carolina Congressional District map, so what I would do, I'm looking like for the old map, because this is 2024. Wild. I would, maybe do 2023, just because I know that like that was last year, and things like that. So there are different ways to look it up, and there's a really, if you just Google it, and like with Wikipedia, there's a really good page that shows all the congressional district maps that North Carolina has ever had. So if you're, into congressional district maps and seeing all the lines and seeing how it's changed over the years, like me, and it's kind of nosy, you can just kind of see how they've changed over the years, because it's not even the same map from whenever I applied. My map was very wild. It really makes no sense. But I mean, I got in. So, I'm not going to complain. But yeah, you can always look at the different congressional district maps. Just like I said, if you are curious, and just to see how North Carolina has changed.
Yeah.
And before we end, we just want to talk a little bit about one more thing that makes science and math really special. So currently, as we're recording in January, our students actually aren't in their second semester classes yet. Typically when you go back after the winter break, you're either going into exams on first semester or starting all new classes, starting from scratch. But for us, we actually have what we call January term. So J term for short, is really a chance for students to get to try something new, try something different. And without the stipulations of, formal classroom settings and things like that. J term is a graduation requirement. So it's not like, oh, I don't have class for January, let me go backpacking in Europe, or I don't know if it's cold there right now. If it is cold, I wouldn't know. But things like that. So it is a graduation requirement, and it is something that all students have to do both years here at Science and Math. So the way Daytime works for us, you can either take 1 month-long course or 1 4-week-long course, or 2 2-week-long courses. And with those courses, there's a wide range of things that students are able to do. Just talking to ambassadors, or students who like to stop by our offices and just hearing the different things they get to do. Have been really cool. So we've had students who are doing like some food or like cooking things. Day terms, like our Dean of Science does the science of bread making every year. And this year they made pretzels, and so one of the science teachers came by and gave the registrar a pretzel, and we have another student who was in a Caribbean food one. Outside of food, even though we do love food at Science and Math, not everything is food. But we also have things like our aviation J term, where students actually get to fly planes, and use flight simulators. There's some students who might be very interested in research, and so they can do, a very intensive math or physics or any type of research. There are things like, there's one on rom-coms, I think. When I was a community coordinator, I did one on fandom things and like comic books. So, we went to comic book stores and things like that. And then even some students get to travel. So one of your 2 years at Science and Math for J term, you're allowed to travel. So we do some out of state travel. So I know this year they're going to the West. So they're going to Arizona. They usually go to New York for J term. But also students are able to do international trips. So even though the School of Science and Math is cost free and you don't pay to come here, those trips you do have to pay for. We cannot afford, the state of North Carolina does not give us the money and cannot afford to send, essentially 400 and actually 980 between the 2 residential campuses. I can't afford to take them, or send them all out of the country. That's very expensive. But some students who are able to pay for that, or might have gotten small scholarships or done some community fundraising, were able to go on the trips. And so this year. And then we have trips that are going to Japan. We have a trip going to Greece. Australia left yesterday. We have one that's going to the Galapagos Islands. I think I already said Australia, Italy. And so they get to go a lot of really, really cool places. And so it's a really fun opportunity for students to get to, look at the country, try something new, try lots of really cool food. Because every student I know that says they're going out of the country, I want to eat lots of food for me, especially Japan and Italy, because I love Italian and Japanese food. And so just different things like that. They get to study different things, whether it be culture, architecture. I know in one of the J terms, they are looking at ecology and ecosystems and things like that. So it's not just, getting to be in a new country and kind of just shopping and playing around, but you actually get to learn things and things like that too. And some of them will partner with schools that are similar to ours in those countries, and thus we get to go to those schools. So it's a lot of really cool things students get to do during that J term time, where they explore things that they typically wouldn't get to do during the school year, during the academic year, just because their schedules are so busy. So like I said, it's just a time for them to learn something different. So that's kind of essentially what J term is. Like I said, it's something that's very unique to science and math. And one of my favorite parts of science and math, just because students get to do a lot of cool things. We get to hear a lot of cool things and get lots of cool pictures. And a lot of good memories for students as well.
I think J term is my favorite thing. I just remember back to when I was in high school and we didn't do anything fun like that in January. I just remember it being like kind of a sad, depressing time because it was cold and you're back in the swing of things. And it was just like, here we are.
Yeah.
I can just tell you, it started before Christmas, the talk about Japan. Like we have lots of our campus ambassadors here in Morganton that are going on that trip. They were so excited. They've been talking about the food. So they were really excited and pumped about the holidays and to get to the January term. So how awesome is that for students to be so excited to get past Christmas to get back to school? So I think that's really awesome. But then there's, like you said, there's big things, but there's also smaller things as well. And one of my favorite things that we do here on this campus in Morganton is they make games, board games. So they start out like for a week and they play different kinds of board games. So you'll see them all around campus with board games, just in big groups playing board games. And then they develop their own board game at the end of that. I just think that's a really cool kind of thing that they do. And I enjoy that. I think that's awesome. So I would be right there in the middle of that. So just to talk about those is one thing, but we want you to actually see it. So we're going to end the show a little bit early today and then show you some video of some of the things that are going on around campus, both campuses, because there's lots of stuff going on. So thanks for joining us. Episode 6 is a wrap. So we appreciate it. And don't forget, come back for number 7. Bye.